Yes, I guess we'll make a start without Alisher, and hope that he can join us in a moment. I've just messaged him, so hopefully he can join us. So we will, but we'll proceed anyway because we only have 1 hour. So welcome everyone to this event on the state of the media in Uzbekistan. We have set this up as a meeting in order to be more democratic, in order to hear from different people in the audience and have a discussion on the topic of today. But that obviously means you need to be disciplined and to mute yourself when others are speaking so that we don't have any interference. So today we're going to run this as a discussion rather than a panel so that we can hear from different voices from the Uzbek media community and those in the audience as well, many of whom have great expertise on the topic. So the media freedom situation in Uzbekistan is obviously a topic of great importance, a signature feature of the path that President Mirziyoyev has taken the country in. But of course, recent events have called into question some of the progress that Uzbekistan is making or has made in this field. So to discuss these topics with us today, we have a panel of 4 individuals. Hopefully Alisher will be joining us in a moment. But first we have Nikita Makarenko, who is a journalist and author of Makarenko's Effect, the most popular blog in Russian language in Uzbekistan. We have Navbahor Imamova, who is a prominent Uzbek journalist at the Voice of America, who's been covering the region for over 20 years. In 2018, she gained accreditation within Uzbekistan and became the first ever US-based correspondent to be operating in the country. She's just returned to Washington, DC from Tashkent. And we have Parvina Ayubova, who is a journalist at multiple media outlets in Uzbekistan, currently a news editor at Kun.uz. We are hoping Alisher Ruziohunov will be joining us. Later, he's an independent journalist and correspondent at Kun.uz. So recent events, as I said, have called into question the media reforms and the changes that have been going on in the country. Blogger Miraziz Bazarov, who publicly called for the decriminalization of homosexuality in the country, was beaten and hospitalized on March 28th. This assault came the same day that a mob had broken up a weekly meeting of anime and K-pop fans in Tashkent that Bazarov had been involved in organizing and were accused of being supportive of homosexuality. The case divided the public, with some saying Bazarov was a provocateur who'd had it coming to him, and others saying the incident showed the true situation with human rights in the country. Police were very quick to accuse Bazarov of propagandizing homosexuality and trying to create conditions for protest. Komil Alamjanov, chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Public Foundation for Support and Development of the National Mass Media, tweeted a video with a similar argument, claiming that the Bazarov had called the decriminalization of homosexuality was an assault on traditional values and on Islam. Days later, the government criminalized insult and slander of the President Mirziyoyev, in digital and online forms, announcing that on March 31st. And on April 1st, the press service of the Ministry of Interior issued a statement accusing Polish journalist Agnieszka Pikulika of spreading negative and unobjective information about Uzbekistan in some of her tweets about the Bazarov case. So, as I say, we're going to run this as a conversation. And before we delve into some of these issues, I wanted to first ask the panelists to reflect on the current political environment for the media in the country. It's obviously now the 5th year Mirziyoyev has been president. The country has changed in a number of important ways. But how has the media environment specifically changed over the past 5 years? So I'll throw that question out to Parvina first, and then Nikita can jump in, and then Navbahor.
Thank you, Edward. So, since President Mirziyoyev has come to power in 2016, our Uzbek media indeed have been given greater freedom. So media outlets started to cover some politically sensitive issues, such as corruption, for example. But anyway, so the media sphere remains highly controlled in the country. For example, criticizing the highest level of the government is still out of question, and there definitely will be consequences for journalists themselves and media they work. And we also haven't made impressive like improvements in international rankings on our press freedoms. In fact, we are on 156th place, according to Reporters Without Borders. And you know, as many of meaningful reforms have failed, we can see now how the government is rolling back to the old ways of controlling civil society and free speech. And I can say that this tendency is quite alarming, especially for me as a journalist.
What do you think is driving that move towards previous practices, historic ways?
It's hard to say really what is triggering them. Maybe I don't know. You see, reforms, just many of the reforms that were promised, I can say that they have failed. So maybe that's the reason.
Maybe that the reforms have opened up a space for greater criticism, and some officials don't like that additional space for criticism.
Yeah.
Nikita, would you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I agree, definitely. But I mean, the media freedom in Uzbekistan is just too general. I think that every person have a different experience compared to their number of audience and their actual sphere of activities. If talking about me, I mean, I feel a stagnation, so there is definitely no progress. We're going back and forward on the same place. But what's a really new thing? I mean, it's been boiling for a while, but now it really bothers me as a journalist and a blogger. So, for example, for now, I don't feel a lot of danger from the state or whatever. So they don't oppress my freedom of speech. Like, I don't feel it. But what's really oppressed my freedom of speech is what Noam Chomsky called the fourth filter. If you know his concept of propaganda, there was like 5 filters which control your self-censorship. So filter number 4, he called it flak. And flak is the Nazis' 88mm gun, which been shooting very quickly. And by this term, he described an enormous amount of comments, threats, and whatever, which people throw on you if you cover particular topic. So now this is a real problem, because when I touch a sensitive topic like LGBT topic, which I do, I get like 10, 20 death threats a day and hundreds of hate speech comment in the Facebook, in private messages, everywhere. There is no any possibilities to stop it somehow on a level of a rule of law. It just doesn't work. And actually, we are facing this alone. No one can protect us. The law enforcement can't protect us. Nothing can be done because cyberbullying in Uzbekistan was not recognized on a level, again, of the law. It just doesn't exist for the law. And we can't protect us from the self. So this is really bothering me as a journalist and blogger today in Uzbekistan. And so far, I don't have answer, and no one have an answer what to do with this.
Well, beyond the LGBT issue, are there other issues you feel provoke backlash if you report on them?
It's anything related to any topic which potentially could insult a big amount of people. You know, this whole concept of insulting a group of people is the common thing which been raised in Russia after the Pussy Riot case, when they even created a special insulting of religious people law, you know, which is kind of crazy. And any topic which potentially could insult a significant amount of people, it could be religious topic related to nationality, national pride, or whatever, is potentially dangerous to be under fire of this flag.
And now, Bahor, you've been covering the country for 2 decades. You've been visiting Tashkent very frequently. What is your assessment of the situation?
I agree with both of my colleagues, but there's definitely more to what we see in Uzbekistan than just, you know, what happened in the last 4 or 5 years and what has been happening as we speak. What has not fundamentally changed is the fact that the state still wants to dictate what is journalism. They want to determine who is a professional journalist and who's not. And because many of the reforms are failing, because the government is not delivering what it promised, what it overpromised, right, for the last few years, now they're pushing back. Now they want to control as much as possible. And I also see the most recent developments as a response, as a reaction, as a reactionary response to the fact that the government sees the benefits of having a professional media. So, you know, there is this dilemma, love-hate relationship with media. On one hand, the system knows it stands to benefit from credible media. It's good to have platforms where you can get your big messages out and have a public discussion and engage people. And they do want to show this dynamic, energetic society that is engaging in problem solving and the discussion of all these critical issues. But on the other hand, they still don't know how to respond to criticism. And I hope we can get to, you know, this issue later in our discussion. What I hear a lot from the authorities, Edward, is that we have to spend so much time responding to media because they still don't have media strategies in place. They still don't know how to work with, you know, media coverage. They feel, as Nikita just said, they're incredibly sensitive. I would argue oversensitive. The Uzbek society has always been quite an emotional and sensitive society. They, you know, it's hard to be level-headed, cold, sort of, you know, sober towards hard issues. And maybe it's a process that the country needs to go through. Maybe it should be this organic, you know, processes that the society must evolve. But in general, it's the overreaction, it's the insecurity of the system, and also this inferiority complex that Uzbekistan has also suffered. But on the other hand, Edward, I mean, a lot has happened that is incredibly positive. You know, in the Uzbek media, we have a much better Uzbek content now than ever, I would argue. Uzbek journalists are more connected to the world than ever. Their output is on a daily basis is much better than before. You know, Uzbeks in general are learning now about what's really happening in the country through domestic sources rather than relying on the outside, you know, services. And also there's a media market that's slowly shaping. Of course, it's corrupt. It's based on many vested interests, but we do have a media market in the country now. Journalists are trying to professionalize. They are trying to get better. I don't know of any journalist in the country who doesn't have an idea about how to move the country's journalism forward. You know, journalists want to create their own platforms. If it doesn't work with one media outlet, they're trying to have their own, you know, business projects. Things don't work. So basically what we see in the Uzbek media is all the issues that the world's mass media face every day. And add to that is the Uzbekness of the problems, you know, the kind of problems that we specifically have in Uzbekistan. You still have a very authoritarian approach to media. The, you know, the Agency on Information and Mass Communication still wants to tell you and the public who's a journalist and who's not. And that's completely unfair and unacceptable. And journalists have been sort of, you know, responding in some straight and in some indirect ways that you can't control us any longer. I see a nervous system who knows that they can't stop the media sort of players, including bloggers and professional journalists, private media, independent media, and they're trying to do whatever they can to stop them. And it's not some kind of an organized plot. I hear from a lot of officials who actually welcome, professionalization of media, credible media. They want to work with media. But on the other hand, they're not the ones who are calling the shots. They can't change this. So overall, the media policy still is incredibly autocratic and based on the old ways of running the show. So, let's have a new rules of engagement, the authorities are saying, where we tell you how to behave. And they're drawing some really thick red lines around specifically, private so-called independent media. Well, look what happened, how homophobic the Uzbek media has been for the last 2 weeks. Being the toy in the hands of the authorities who want to create this picture that Uzbekistan is homophobic. That's the general message. As ugly as that sounds, it doesn't look right for the country, and nobody stands to benefit from that. And it pained me as a journalist, who's been engaging with the media community. We've been doing a lot of trainings in Uzbekistan, and I know that's not how many of our colleagues feel in Uzbekistan, and yet the media output, the content all on what happened to Bazarov and overall the LGBT issues is incredibly, hate-based. And that's, to me, is concerning. And I think the major question for all of us is, how do we move forward from here? How do we change the Uzbek media, mood and sentiments in a way that is constructive? That's not easily used by the authorities to kind of whatever parts of the authorities we're talking about to get those hate-based messages out.
How significant do you think these recent events are? We're obviously in an election year, moving towards presidential election in the fall. How significant would you say the recent events are in terms of reflecting on the media situation in the country and what's maybe to come in the future?
Realistically speaking, this should be an easy election, really. I mean, President Mirziyoyev has a right to get reelected. It's not like we have a tough political competition and we have this vibrant, political environment where you have differences and you have choices and diversity. You don't have that. So, I don't really buy this argument that, President Mirziyoyev and his circle are really afraid of what's really happening in the country and somehow, he may lose the elections. I don't see that happening. The campaign will start 3 months ahead of the elections. You have 5 parties who will obviously introduce their, representatives as their nominees, and even the registration of new political parties shouldn't be an issue. This really goes deep down to what I said earlier: insecurity. If you, at this point, the Uzbek government has to be able to honestly assess for itself what worked and what has not worked. And the fact that President Mirziyoyev is widely popular around the country, they should know better. I mean, when I have these conversations with, various officials in Uzbekistan and they tell me, oh, you don't know how hard it is to control the country, the word control there is the key. They still think that somehow they need to protect the minds of the Uzbek people from getting poisoned. By who? I mean, the media in Uzbekistan is the best reflection of the Uzbek society today. The media reflects all the ills and all the goods of the Uzbek society. The media sector is as corrupt as the rest of the Uzbek, industry. So it's not like you have some kind of a sector in Uzbekistan that somehow is plotting against the regime. Journalists are not plotting against President Mirziyoyev, if that's how the authorities feel. And it would be utterly stupid and short-minded to look at journalists as potential enemies. It can't be that way. But unfortunately, that's what we see. That's how the behavior of the country, the regime, I would say, I should be clear, is seen now. You believe in yourself, trust, and open up this space. But on the other hand, Edward, what makes me happy in general is how dynamic and how vibrant the media environment is. Everybody wants to be a part of it. and you have new players constantly emerging, new voices, and everybody wants to have a piece of bread in this sector. I see many new media outlets growing and developing, learning lessons every day, failing in some ways. So it's not like, we have the end of the day in Uzbekistan when it comes to the media situation. I just see a scared political system of what is still quite weak, but trying an optimistic media sector.
Yeah, I could add, thanks now, Bahor. I really liked your comparison that media reflects the society very well. Just a funny fact, because a few days ago, a journalist society, we have a kind of group on Telegram, we've been discussing a very funny case. So there is one website, I wouldn't tell the name, but it's like top 5 the most readable online websites in Uzbekistan. So someone found that they have price list for investigations. Like, if you need to investigate that costs that. And when we asked them why you do that, they completely did not understand the question, why we are unhappy and what's wrong there. Because for them, it is absolutely normal. Absolutely. The positive article costs this money, the negative article costs this money. They really have a price list with their stamp and sign of their director. Just a funny fact, illustration.
No. That has been the norm, I'm afraid, Nikita. We've known that's been happening for a long time. Paid content is widely offered in Uzbekistan without acknowledgement. So the public in general doesn't know what is paid content and not. I mean, we have this term here in the West, right? Payola. So you pay and you run your content. And it used to be applied to the entertainment sector in general. But in Uzbekistan, the coverage of the public grievances, the public issues, right? All these debated, sensitive issues, and sort of journalists playing problem solvers, lawyers, prosecutors in some ways. So many outlets, I would even argue that every major so-called independent private news outlet in Uzbekistan engages in what you're describing, Nikita. So they ask for the coverage to be paid by the side that's asking the coverage. So if you have a group of farmers in some, region, or if you have a group of, let's say, I know of a couple of cases which involves abused women. So their lawyers and others, they either cover the parts of the transportation or whatever expenses a reporter needs to go to that specific region and cover, and or they sign an agreement where the media outlet promises to investigate the issue, but is not responsible in the solution of it. So you have this legal agreements between reporters, between the media outlets, and then the grievers, and that complicates a lot of things. I mean, Kun.uz is one of those media outlets that does that, and many people know about that, and they are in constant trouble. And I've trained some of their journalists, and I tell them, you are red meat to the authorities. They can come after you anytime. They can basically catch you doing this. And somebody like Akmal Bukhanov, the head of the anti-corruption agency, says, what do we do about that? And when you talk to the media outlets, they have many justifications about how right this is. They want to cover the issues. In many cases, they're resolving those issues. They are effective, in their coverage. So they argue that that's the way to do journalism right now in this current Uzbekistan, that somebody needs to pay. Somebody, where do media outlets get all this money to cover all these issues there? They don't have the budgets for it. The advertisement revenue doesn't cover all of it. So they have figured out ways to both raise the issues, cover them effectively as far as they're concerned, and push on the authorities and try to argue with them that that's not the right way to do. They strongly believe that this is the right thing. And I'm telling you, most of the private and independent media outlets do that.
Well, maybe we are too old-fashioned. Maybe it's a new way of journalism.
I would love to hear what Parvina has to say about that.
Yeah, because you raise an important issue of financial sustainability, funding models. It's obviously understandable to some degree. Media around the world, needs to find revenue sources. So, yeah, I guess if you can comment a little bit on the sustainability of the Uzbek media.
Just to add to what Navbahor has said, that yeah, I have heard about such cases. Then journalists take money just to do some reporting, and sometimes readers call to Gazeta Uz and ask, so we have this problem, could you please cover it? And we say, sorry, we don't have people and we don't have time. And they say, okay, how much will it cost for you to cover it? And when I first answered this call, I was just shocked, really. And when I understood that, so this problem is how to say, is widespread. I was even more shocked. Really, it's just I don't know. Maybe how Nikita said, it's a new way of journalism in Uzbekistan.
So it's even shaped the way of thinking of the government and law enforcement and whatever, because once I went in Hokimiyat and Hakim told me, okay, how much I should pay for positive article, and I was like, you can't pay me, and he was like, how I can pay? I'm already paying to a lot of journalists. So yeah.
Yeah. And then what you hear from the government is, well, look how, how bad, how unprofessional you guys are, and how unethical. But this is beyond the questions of ethics. I mean, this is really, it crosses all the red lines, and the government is using that then to argue with everybody, with the media community, that you need to be controlled. We need to keep a check on you. But I constantly argue with the officials who say that in general, good journalism is being done for the money. That's not true at the same time. My advice, and what I say usually to these journalists who argue that it's okay to offer paid content because there is no other way. We can't possibly cover all these issues if we don't have extra sources of revenue. I say, well, then acknowledge that. Say that this is paid content. Let the viewers know that you're getting paid for that. At least, through that courtesy, through that acknowledgement, you are being honest with the audiences. Say that if this is something that you want to do. I've had those conversations with Kun.uz, who covers a lot of the grievances, for example, and the same thing with Effect.uz. Like, acknowledge, tell the people that your media outlet is paid by the people who are, who want the story out. And they're not always comfortable with that. In general, they know this is wrong. And, ideally they say, well, we all want to have enough money, right? But Edward, the advertising revenues went so down last year about this time. I was afraid that several media outlets were going to get closed down, including Kun.uz, by the way, which is now seen as a very, self-sustaining major news outlet. I believe they were going to cut at least 50% of they were going to let their 50% of their journalists, because things were it looked pretty bad around May of 2020. But then Uzbekistan opened briefly after the first lockdown, and the advertising revenue went up like 70-80% that it had lost. And since then, it's been quite steady. And so advertising revenues are still very important, but it's not enough to expand, obviously, and also to cover the kinds of issues that make these media outlets relevant and keep them in the media landscape. The YouTube viewership matters. There's this very strong race of clicks. They want that because and the urge to cover sensational issues, sort of very superficial coverage of issues, hype. This is all driven by the fact that they want to earn.
A number of you have alluded to the new media or social media. To what extent is the media landscape changing with the rise of new platforms, technologies? Obviously, Nikita, you yourself are a blogger. What are the differences between the experience of being a blogger and the experience of the traditional media in the country?
Well, at first, just quickly, I want to add that I'm not really agree with Navbahor, because I see that pandemic was the golden age for digital media in Uzbekistan because we never had such big advertisement revenues in the history. And it happened because most of advertisers, they turned from the outdoor advertising to digital. So we got this enormous outdoor budgets in the media. It happened for the first time, and I've been talking with a lot of bloggers and online medias. They've been pretty happy. I don't know about Kun.uz and why they had such a downstream in revenue, but mostly now we have a really big downstream in digital advertisement revenue because again, everything is opening and advertisers, they just go away for outdoor again. Okay, what's about to be blogger and usual journalist? We know that Uzbekistan is unique, absolutely unique, because we have Telegram, this great invention of Pavel Durov, and I'm pretty sure that we need to award Pavel Durov with a golden medal, I don't know, Jalaluddin Manguberdi medal or whatever, because he did so much for Uzbekistan, and he even doesn't know that he did, because he don't care about our market at all. It's a completely different type of media, and what's great in Telegram and what is super dangerous in Telegram is that it have an immediate reaction. So you post something and in 10 minutes, everybody have the news in their pockets. And it's really cool because you have immediate reaction. Your news shared much better than in a Facebook because Facebook have a crazy algorithms which nobody understand. Telegram is pretty simple. You have interesting content and it will be widespread. But the same danger is that crazy facts, propaganda, and misleading information spreads quickly too. So Telegram both had good sides and bad sides. And with Telegram, it's pretty interesting to play with that because most of our decision makers are in Telegram, which is kind of unique too. I don't think that decision makers in European countries or in the United States reading their news from WhatsApp. I don't think so. Maybe Navbahor, I have a different opinion, but our decision makers read Telegram. And sometime when we post something, we get reaction like in minutes. And I did a lot of cool things to help the country and to help the people using this wonderful instrument. As far as I know, our government for years trying to create some instrument to control bloggers in Telegram, because previously we've been like in a dark side of the law because there was no blogger. The word blogger wasn't in the media law. We have now this new tunes for the media law, which brings more responsibility to us. And especially all of us kind of scared because by the new law, we have to control our comments. So we became responsible for what our readers write in comments. And nobody understands what to do with this because we just can't moderate comments. I'm a blogger who is alone and under every post I have hundreds of comments. It's just insane to moderate it, but we have responsibility for this. So no one knows how it will work. We're really waiting for cases because it will be clear from the first case, are the government serious about this or not serious about this? But potentially there is like enormous amount for fantasy for law enforcement because they can take a comment which is 5 years old or whatever, and they could start a case about it. So it's really a danger for us. We're kind of scared, and someone think that we should close comments. I didn't close yet, but I was thinking about it. So let's see how it develops.
Parvina, do you have anything to add maybe regarding other platforms, Instagram, for example, TikTok?
So yeah, I'm not really big fan of Instagram, so I'm not good at it, but TikTok is crazy. I mean, TikTok is super crazy. And again, it's crazy because it have a very special algorithm of immediate reaction. So if you have something really, how to say, so the quality of content is very low. It's about naked people, crazy stuff, religious extremism too. TikTok is full of religious extremism, but the algorithm of TikTok is very quickly sharing the videos among users. It's much better than a Facebook. So all the information spreads very quick, and all the kids are in TikTok. And I have students, I'm professor at the Webster University, and none of them have a Facebook. Literally none of them. 3 of them have Instagram, but all of them have TikTok. And actually, nobody understands what to do with TikTok, how to deal with it, how to moderate with it. It's not a blogging, it's another type of content thinking. So, but I see a lot of, again, good things and bad things in TikTok. You can't imagine how crazy religious extremist propaganda in TikTok. I monitor it, it's just crazy, which is dangerous. But from other point of view, it's just another social network, and people been crazy about Facebook when it's appeared. I remember this, all this propaganda things that it's a color revolution instrument and it's created to do Maidans in post-Soviet countries or whatever. The same thing will start about TikTok right now, but let's see how it develops.
So I want to add to Edward's question about how the emergence of new technologies and media platforms change the media landscape in Uzbekistan. So yeah, for sure, the appearance of new media platforms definitely changed the media landscape in our country. I can say that offline has almost disappeared, and people now read news mostly in Telegram and Facebook. And Telegram and Facebook also have become like platforms to express, platforms for users to express their discontent with the government and sometimes calls to actions. So you can read a lot of criticism in the comments in Telegram or in Facebook. And we can also see the rise of popularity of socio-political blogs and also appearance of like online opinion leaders. And sometimes what they post can influence the decision of officials, for example, or to change something. But you know, this, just in my opinion, these popular blogs also can sometimes be used like by maybe different political forces to try to move their agenda. So that's kind of problem. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now I guess we'll open it up to the audience. We have one question in the chat. If you have a question, you can throw it into the chat, or you can raise your hand. Actually, I don't think the raise hand feature seems to be here. You can chat with me and ask to be next, and you can unmic yourself.
Edward, if I could just add very briefly to what my colleagues just said, the media outlets, and this is another really positive thing, they are investing on digital technology. They are investing on multimedia tools, and they see the value in it greatly. They know that the future is mostly visual media. So they are investing in terms of training, and engaging other professionals around the world as much as they can to really be as as modern in this way as possible. And YouTube specifically for video is still a very important platform. That's where big media platforms really earn, and advertisement comes through them. And just to add to what Nikita said, probably some bloggers did well during coronavirus, but many media outlets struggled. And I actually know of many journalists who worked for, free, at least for a month or two before they could actually get their finances back together. They don't really have any, long-term resources. I mean, they really, their budgets are very tiny in general. You're talking about $2,000-3,000 budgets for 15 to 20 people. I'm talking the size of the newsrooms, and when you lose one big advertiser, it means a lot, and that's when the struggle begins. And it's not easy to get access to credit. It's not easy to get access to investment. It's really hard to have an outside investor if that person is not in Uzbekistan. And so that takes us to longer conversations, obviously, about media market and how it works now. But in general, what made me happy is the passion and the energy that media had during this pandemic period. Everybody worked because they knew and they could see that the value of information grew up, right? We all wanted quality content, and you could see that, and we all used that as much as possible, including our colleagues in Uzbekistan.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Navbahor. We have a question in the chat about what can be done to improve the media situation, what can be done to put pressure on the government or to change their attitude towards the media, which you've all said is problematic in numerous different ways. So a practical question about in what ways can different stakeholders or actors try and enact change in the media landscape in the country. So I don't know who wants to take that on first. Arvina or?
I mean, I can go. One thing that we should all do, whether we're outsider or insider, is we cannot separate the media sector from the rest of the Uzbek society or from the rest of the Uzbek general system. You have to look at it from the perspective of, okay, we need good media, we need credible media in Uzbekistan to move forward in every sector, right? So the government needs to understand that. And those in the international community who want to see positive change in Uzbekistan need to understand that. And we need to stop looking at things in white and black, and have this very polarized view on what's happening in Uzbekistan. The society is as complex as any other society, Yes, there is deep corruption, there is autocracy, there are all the kinds of ills there, but also we need to be able to see, what is positive when it happens, and stop labeling, journalists specifically or bloggers as like, pro-Western or anti-Western, liberal and conservative. It helps if you're in Uzbekistan. I would say it's a different, discussion. But in general, I don't think we want to paint people. And I think the human rights organizations need to keep that in mind. And if the goal is to have a constructive, engagement with Uzbekistan to push things to change, you need to talk to everyone. So right now we have a choice. We can basically just cut off our conversations with all the people as we see homophobic, right? As we see anti-LGBT and think that they're part of the, state security services plot and they're basically the toys of the government. No need to talk to them. Let's basically, cut them out and deal with those, maybe at least with a few voices that we like, right? And I'm afraid that kind of attitude is going to hurt all of us. I want to talk. I mean, as a journalist, I want to engage everybody in Uzbekistan. I want to talk to everybody, and I want to know to understand what's really happening in the society. And let's also think about the priorities. What is the priority here? I know that Washington doesn't want to waste its political capital on the arguments regarding the LGBT. As much as many of us don't like that, I don't think Washington is prepared to sacrifice all the other issues to this. And the international human rights organizations understand that better than anyone else. Remember what happened in Kyrgyzstan in 2014 and 2013 when the LGBT issues were being raised, and where that conversation took the society and the system and what kind of changes that we didn't see, right? So I think right now we all need to kind of calm down a little bit and think about how do we really, what do we want to see in a society where the majority's rights are not protected. The majority's rights, in a society where where we still see a deep lack of the rule of law. What are we talking about here? I think, focusing better and maybe identifying our priorities and then engaging journalists. And of course, invest in training. I cannot underestimate the impacts of training and education, journalism education. I know this is long-term and it's very hard to see the results right away, but changing one mind in the media sector a day, one young mind specifically, even if that person doesn't want to be a journalist or a producer of content, I think that makes a huge difference. So if you have money and if you want to invest in media development, do, even if you don't have a direct representation in Uzbekistan, even if you're not registered in Uzbekistan, there is a lot we can do through digital media, online media, and offer trainings in Uzbek. I mean, that's another recommendation I would have. So
fantastic. Well, thank you, Nabil. So training and engaging with everyone. Pavina or Nikita, if you have anything briefly to add.
Yes, answering the question of Muzaffar, I believe it was a question of Muzaffar. I think journalists are in the same boat of like everyone in Uzbekistan. No one in Uzbekistan is protected by the rule of law, like literally no one. And safety of every particular journalist depends on the mood of a few persons. I mean, we are not protected by the rule of law. And that's what I see as the main challenge. I don't feel protected. I feel that I'm dependent on the mood of a particular people, which is not healthy at all. But I will see a big progress in the society if we will be protected by the rule of law.
Excellent. And we have another question around Russian language media. So the extent to which it has a future in the country and how you see the Russian media environment evolving, Russian language media environment.
Okay, maybe I will answer as the representative of the most popular Russian language blog. Well, I don't think it's dying. And because people been talking about dying of Russian language media like for years. It don't happen because, I mean, I have a total respect for Uzbek language and I produced an enormous amount of content motivating people to learn Uzbek. But the reality is that if you want to have an access to information, you have to know either English or Russian, because literally you can't Google in Uzbek. There is not enough information. There is not enough websites. So you have to learn at least one language as an addition. So because of this, there will be always demand for Russian language media because it is just easier to learn Russian. It is around. So, and if you will come to Tashkent and if you will check situation with kindergartens in Russian language, with schools in Russian language, you will see that they are extremely popular, extremely. And that's just few arguments why Russian language will be actual. They never will be as popular as an Uzbek, no doubt. Like for Russian language media, like for example, for Gazeta.uz, 40-50,000 of views is a super top result for an article. While in Kun.uz and Dario.uz, it's not a result at all. They measuring for hundreds of thousand views. It's different things, but it will not die. I don't think so.
Barbina, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I also think that it's, I don't think that Russian language media are slowly dying. They're still popular, but not, of course, as popular as Uzbek language media. And I think that Russian language media is mostly popular among readers in maybe Tashkent or just like big regions, but not in other parts of the countries. So, and I don't think it's hardly that we will, we will cover rest of the regions. Mostly of our readers are in Tashkent, in the capital. That can be the problem.
Yeah. And we have another question around the trolling or the digital bullying that you described, Nikita. The extent to which this is organized, we know this is happening in other parts of the world in terms of troll factories and the factory of the answers, or factory of answers. To what extent is is this digital bullying organized?
Yeah, so the digital bullying in most cases are very well organized in Uzbekistan. So we don't have troll factories, but we have Telegram groups and Facebook groups which are controlled by particular people, and we all know these people by name, and there are hundreds of thousands of subscribers in these channels and these groups, and people get instructions there to bully a particular person. We've seen many times screenshots, and even during the last LGBT question, I even get a screenshot from such a group. So there been like an order for subscribers to dislike my posts. And it's very well organized, very well conducted. For sure, there is a big amount of people who just join the movement, who just jump in the boat, but mostly it always started by particular people.
And we have a question around open source software and the extent to which, in general, there's a culture or a movement for open source materials within Uzbekistan. Is that something anyone on the panel can speak to?
They have been, oh, go ahead, Nikita.
No, I just don't want to monopolize the answers.
No, go ahead.
I never seen any big interest in open source software in Uzbekistan. And it's, again, a very big question of intellectual property in Uzbekistan, which is not a thing. We all use pirated software. And you need open software when you can't buy software which is licensed. But we don't buy, we just steal. So it's never been developed.
And then we have a question around the recent legal changes or legal amendments on disrespect to society, the state and state symbols. Does anyone want to comment on these legal amendments and how they've affected journalists?
And that worries all of us equally, I think, because independence of courts, you don't have that, right? In a country where you can't just say, well, if you commit a crime, if you are guilty, then you must serve your time or you must be punished. That argument doesn't fly in Uzbekistan as much as the government tries to kind of give that kind of a justification. Then the lawmakers, I've talked to some of them who argue that we need those, strict rules. Can't really debate you on that, because the interpretation of those rules, laws, or new order, right? New rules of engagement is so questionable. As I said earlier, it's a very sensitive and it's a very insecure in many ways society. So anybody, especially I'm afraid that authorities are going to use that left and right. I think this is going to create a space of fear. I think this is going to slow the development of media. Forget about media freedom in many ways. It's going to increase self-censorship. It's going to really hurt the society in any way. Somebody earlier asked about what can anybody do to maybe pressure the Mirziyoyev administration to allow for more media freedom. As far as the administration is concerned, they're giving the maximum freedom. They'll argue with you that, oh my God, we have created all this space, we've given so much to you, right? And the word given or to give in this sense really pisses me off as a journalist, because authorities, it's not like it's not the kind of a gift that they think they're giving to us. It should be the natural thing. We should be free, in any society, we should be able to work as journalists. But in Uzbekistan, if the government thinks, and they do, that the media development so far is one of their biggest, the ultimate achievements of the Mirziyoyev administration, they really need to think deeper and long-term about the repercussions and implications of these new policies. And I don't see internal debate on this. We know that there are sort of liberal and conservative, pro and anti groups within the system that are clashing with each other. But I don't think the government doesn't have a sophisticated conversation going on this, as far as I know. The security services, the internal affairs ministry, and others who work with them are really pushing for them. and it's really unfortunate.
I would add to Navbahor, thanks for the comment. I have my own attitude to this new legal amendments, and it's I'm super calm because it's kind of zen, the media zen. You know, when the rule of law is not working, it's not really important which new law they will amend. If they want to put me in prison for 10 years, they will just knock the door. They don't need a reason. So, okay, they have more reasons to do that, but it's not the case to be stressed.
I will add too that, so as for myself, I'm quite concerned about recent developments regarding media. And, while the government claims to welcome criticism, we see how new laws and amendments aimed at the opposite, and it's really not a good sign. And although some officials might defend these law initiatives as necessary to prevent alleged abuses of freedom, we know how in countries like Uzbekistan, so how these laws and amendments can be used to limit free speech and for pressure on media. Thank you.
Fantastic. Have one final question, which is related, which I think Navbahor is maybe best place to start with an answer related to Western media, being representative of Voice of America, the other large Western-backed media outlet that covers the region, probably being Radio Free Europe. How are those outlets perceived? How do you think there's a difference for you as a Voice of America journalist as opposed to a journalist with another outlet in terms of your access, in terms of the perception of the public towards your outlet?
So the attitude towards the RFURL, I'm afraid, has not changed as much as, the government tries to paint this very comfortable picture about, oh, we're fine. Look, we have so many critical journalists inside the country. We're fine. Like, you want to criticize us, go ahead, right? Have a feast. But at the same time, we know that the RFURL Uzbek is blocked. And whenever this issue is raised with me specifically, because, I represent the same agency, United States Agency for Global Media. And of course, here, I'm not talking on behalf of my organization. I'm just sharing my own, insights based on what I see there. And here, from here, my argument with the officials is that, but you're keeping a very, a religious eye on the content of Ozotlik, right? Most of the Ozotlik sources are, from the deep down of the system. So obviously, many people in the system still rely on Ozotlik to get their stories out. So Ozotlik is comfortable, and I don't necessarily see any sort of development in terms of their accreditation. Of course, they can, also speak for themselves, but I don't necessarily sense an anti-Western attitude in Uzbekistan. When I go to Uzbekistan, I push for whatever I want. I get a lot of no's, of course. I am aggressive. If I want an interview with someone, I work with them. I am, happy. I'm happy to tell you that the press secretaries work better now. Press services function better now. I don't get asked for special letters of request. I make my case and I get my interviews. Of course, we all have to be extremely careful. I watch my back. I'm not, I'm careful. But so far, I've been basically regularly visiting Uzbekistan. I didn't go there for a year because of the pandemic. So that was a long gap, but I reported, on Uzbekistan from here. We don't cover every story in Uzbekistan. Obviously, we don't cover every major story in Uzbekistan. We do as much as we can. And RFURL, our sister organization, focuses on the domestic developments, whereas we look at the bigger picture. So whatever is being covered by them, we don't want to duplicate each other. I'm fine. I don't let anybody to pressure me. Nobody puts any conditions for me. I get asked a lot about that. And if they did, I wouldn't stay there for a minute. They know. Instead, I find them being actually careful. that they know that they can't, try to manipulate the situation. I tell people why I want to talk to them. I get access as much as possible, but there are many stories that I haven't been able to do because obviously, people who I want to talk to, for example, we would love to interview President Mirziyoyev. I think it's high time that he actually talks to real journalists instead of people who are representing his press services. I mean, it was really nice to see these recent developments of him sort of interacting with, with the press corps that follows him during his regional visits. But to get asked questions by his own, press service representatives is so fake and so orchestrated, and it doesn't really, I was in Uzbekistan then, and I basically told the relevant officials that it is a shame that by now the leader of the country should be confident enough to take natural questions. I mean, he hasn't, he has addressed every key issue in the country. What is there for him to be uncomfortable about any question? I mean, what question could really corner him? Either they're, obviously this is an issue of insecurity. They're afraid that they won't be able to handle some questions, for example. And I always argue against that. I think there should be more Western journalists in Uzbekistan in general. I think we should be seeking access as much as possible. We should be engaging the authorities as much as possible, and let and push them in ways that is also constructive, that let them realize the value of this kind of engagement. Obviously, the Western media is not always interested in Uzbekistan. We know that. But this year, for example, as the presidential elections approach, we should be expecting a note from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that it's much easier to get accredited if you're coming to cover Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is open for the media of the world, that, they want, they offer the transparency and other values. So the government should be better communicating where it is. We have a new press secretary, right, of the President Mirziyoyev. So he has started doing briefings. But this crazy thing in Uzbekistan about briefings being different from press conferences, also, that's one of the things that sickens me as a journalist, actually. They think that briefings are non-question events where an official just shows up and tells you whatever he or she wants to say and just leaves, whereas press conferences are, where you have interactions. And I don't know where they got those rules, because if you invite journalists, you should be ready for questions. That's how, I refuse to go to events where I have no opportunities to answer questions. And they have these killing long events in Tashkent, Edward, for 3 hours, 3-hour sessions before you can actually ask a question. I left a couple of these events recently in March because you don't have that much time. They need to value your time. If you're bringing in press to cover those events, journalists should be demanding enough to tell them, if I don't get a chance to ask within an hour at least, we're not covering this. But unfortunately, many media outlets don't have that, can't say that, because they feel like they must cover these events. They feel obligation more than freedom, unfortunately. So I think we should be more demanding, and we should be constructive at the same time, that we need to realize that the other side also stands to benefit from these interactions, including the president of the office of the president. And it's time. I mean, this year is a major test.
Let's hope it happens. We've just run over time, so I think we'll end the discussion here. I want to thank Parvina, Nikita, and Navbahor for a really fantastic overview and insights from their different perspectives on what's going on with the state of the media in the country. Some reasons for hope, I think, we can take from the conversation, and hopefully the government will be true to its word in terms of wanting to view the media as being allies rather than adversaries. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming. We have a number of Oxus Society events coming up. The next event for our virtual Oxus Circle, which is our membership society, is on April 23rd, which will be our trivia night. I know a number of people who are in the audience have been very successful, and we have Sher Hashimov, the master of the trivia, with us here today as well. So please follow us on social media. Please look on our website, where we're constantly updating with new stories, new data sets. And so come and follow what we're doing. But with that, I will close and thank everyone for coming, thank our panelists, and wish everyone a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Edward, for invitation. I was glad to see everybody here. I hope that we will chat sometime again.
Definitely. Good
Thank
luck.
you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Good luck. Bye.